Hey there, I just wanted to pop in to do a quick review of Siege and Storm, part of the Grishaverse from Leigh Bardugo. I've been reading this book for, I guess, a few days now, and I have some thoughts. So this is a continuation, of course, of the Grishaverse story, Shadow and Bone. Alina is the Sun Summoner, and the Darkling, the main antagonist of the book, is power hungry and wants access and control to her power. And she now has the amplifier from the stag that we're introduced to in the first novel, and now there is this ice dragon that you see depicted on the cover, which is part of the second amplifier that Alina acquires, which makes her power even that much more prominent and, quite frankly, frightening. I I don't know how I feel about this book. On one hand, I was finding myself annoyed by some of the more petty squabbles and things that were going on. I understand that it's young adult and you have to keep in mind that even in like a high fantasy or just regular young adult fantasy novels, even if the characters are in darker, more chilling situations, they are still going to inevitably act like a teenager here and there. So I'm kind of forgiving of that in certain books, the way writers will depict that. But in this book, I was finding myself getting annoyed at spots here and there. Like the stakes have obviously risen a lot. Typically, that's what happens when you have a trilogy. That things are going to progressively get worse because you need some story to carry over. But there was little things like, I guess there's kind of like a love triangle. This is kind of going into spoilers if anyone's interested in reading the trilogy. There's a Grisha by the name of Zoya that we were introduced to in the first novel, and it's clear that Alina is very jealous of her and jealous of her beauty and the control that she has in her powers, and does not enjoy the fact that Mal seems to be captivated by her. And this is brought back up in this book, and it's just seeing how that kind of played out and some of the snide comments that Alina was making in her POV when there's so much blood and destruction that's going on. It's just kind of irksome. And I don't know how else to describe that. But despite that, I did like how much darker the novel became as you read more. I liked that Alina had to grapple with the fact that her power may be something that she cannot control, that she felt that there was something pulling at her, like there's a certain darkness that's within that she was frightened of, that she felt like she couldn't tamper down. And I always love those themes being explored, that every person, no matter their intentions, has both the polarity of lightness and darkness. That there's no one person that's truly good and there's no one person that's truly evil. I mean, there's obviously exceptions that we see throughout history, but people in general always operate in the gray area. We all have an element of darkness in us that we sometimes fear and would never voice out. Like we have these thoughts that can sometimes be scary, and I love that the book was delving into that, and that there was times where Alina wanted to just give up control because that power that's coursing through her, she felt that she was dimming that light within her, no pun intended, and she wanted to kind of let loose, and she was just becoming more progressively frustrated, that she felt like she was being held back, that she still felt vulnerable, that she still felt like she couldn't be what everyone is prophesizing her to be, that she's this great saint that will bring about this change in the world and that she would lead everyone through salvation. And just feeling that she's not worthy of the title that's being given to her, and that she's not worthy of the power that was latent within her, and just dealing with that power struggle. I really love that theme so much throughout the book. The resolution towards the end, I liked it and I didn't like it at the same time. I can't really explain why. Like her being self-sacrificing made sense narratively, but there's a part of me that kind of wanted her to succumb to her darkness and have the intention of joining forces with the Darkling and being kind of seduced by evil. And it just, even by a little bit, I can't describe it. Like, the dynamic between her and the Darkling is obviously disturbing. She's still a teenager. He's like 1,000 years old or whatever. And obviously, it's not a relationship that should be glorified and we shouldn't be rooting for it. But in kind of like an effed up kind of way, like, I wanted there to be an instance where us as a reader would genuinely believe that she has completely succumbed to the dark side, and that there would be a time where she would grapple with that and see that play out, only for her maybe in the third novel to change her mind and then realize what she's allowed herself to become, and then choose the path of being the hero. Like, I just wanted her to be seduced by darkness a little bit more, to give into that a little bit more. I don't know why. I just have to say that suppressing darkness, suppressing the powers within herself, and her progressively becoming weaker as she didn't tap into the power, versus when she let go and used both amplifiers on her and felt like she was losing control, to the point where she felt that she was going to kill some of the Grisha that were part of the second army. Those were the moments where I thought to myself, yes, I really like where this story is going. So while it does have a lot of young adult fantasy tropes, it just depends on the story. Like, for some, I really enjoy it. For others, I get really irritable about it. And I can see why this series would have both extremely passionate fans and also a lot of naysayers. I can see why the reviews were so incredibly mixed, especially with the series that follows Shadow and Bone, the Six of Crows duology, and just the charisma of those characters. And even though they are their own archetypes that are very familiar to the YA genre, they had so much character. Their dialogue was so incredibly rich. I can see how people would just look past the tropes and put that series on a pedestal versus this one. I can see why the reviews were so mixed. So my overall star rating of this, I think, is still going to be 4 stars. I actually rated Shadow of Bone 4 stars, more like 3.5 out of 5 stars. But in Goodreads, I officially put it as 4 because they don't allow for half point markings. For Grishaverse, I would probably put it around the same, like 3.5 to 4 stars. I can't deny the fact that I'm actually interested in the novel, and while I don't see why anyone would necessarily want Alina and the Darkling to be romantically entangled, I can see why they have such a passionate fandom of people that enjoy the dynamic of that relationship in the completely darkest sense, in the most effed up way possible. I am intrigued by that relationship and that push and pull. And I just genuinely wanted Alina to be in touch with that side of herself that much more. I really wanted her to give in to those urges that she had when that power was feeling a little bit out of control, to just give in and then have for her to contend with the consequences of, oh my God, look what I've done. Like, I've actually wanted to kill someone because they dare to defy me, and I will not tolerate that tyranny. I will not tolerate that. And I don't know, like, I just kind of wanted the book to go there that much more. Like, there's so many darker themes that the story so far flirts with that I wish they would push home, but then Leigh Bardugo would then be taking this into adult fiction, and it's still young adult, so you kind of have to mind the audience that you're writing to, right? So overall, I can't say I'm not intrigued by the trilogy so far. Like, both book 1 and book 2 kind of surprised me that it held my attention, and I kept reading and reading further, waiting for the confrontation between Alina and the Darkling to happen. And with Mal, On one hand, I can also understand why there's so many fans that did not like Mal or Mal's arc, but I kind of understand where he's coming from, that he truly appreciates Alina for who she is as a person. He's not necessarily someone that wants something from her. Every other character in the story at some point needs something from Alina due to this power that she has as the sun summoner. But Mal is the one that has known her from the word go and genuinely just wants her as a person. But I can see how some would interpret his actions in this particular book as to say he only appreciates her when she's not outshining him, when she doesn't have powers, when he can be the strong protector, and when she feels weak and feeble and he feels that he has a role to play. So I can see why many would take issue to Mal, but I kind of understood where he's coming from. But there was times too, especially with kind of the elements of the love triangle, if you want to call it that, with him, Zoya, and Alina, where I was just getting irritated and kind of rolling my eyes. But I get it. I get it. And I'm really interested to see how the live adaptation for Netflix will handle that relationship, because from what I've seen from the very few clips from the trailer, the actor that's playing Mal is instantly charming, and he already seems like he's that much more invested in Elena and her safety. Even though I can see that in the books and what Leigh Bardugo was trying to do, like I'm really curious to see how this will play out in the live action. But overall, I'm really fascinated by this trilogy, more so than I thought. I can see where the criticisms are coming from, but I'm not gonna lie, I've been enjoying it so far. We'll see what the third book plays out to be. So Ruin and Rising is the third. See, I was reading it from the back of the book. And I'm going to start reading that, and I might give you my final thoughts on the entire series, but I might not. I was initially saying I was going to do like a more polished video where I would talk about my feelings overall about the series, but we'll see. We'll see.